What is project-based learning? Hi there, my name is Myla Lee. I am a consultant and coach for project-based learning, literacy, and tech integration. I have been in education for over 30 years. 26 of those years have actually been in the classroom. I am a mother of three very amazing kids. If I say so myself. One is a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 15-year-old. I enjoy traveling and being curious. So what is project-based learning? So let's think about how we're going to define and understand that. So let's start with what project-based learning, what PBL is not. So PBL is not a culminating project or an add-on to the traditional instruction at the end or alongside of a unit. So when I think of what PBL isn't, it isn't where the teacher has done all this teaching throughout the unit, has created tests and readings and all these activities, and towards the end has decided, you know what, I am going to have the students do a project at the very end after all the learning has taken place, or having a project that is done not in synchronous with the learning, maybe something done at home as an extra activity. PBL is not teacher-centered. That means that the teacher is creating the instructions and the questions are pre-planned by the teacher. And it also means that the teacher is like assessing all the work and the teachers own the process. That's what we're referring to as teacher-centered. That's what PBL isn't. In a project-based learning unit is not completed alone or at home or showcased only in the classroom or school world. You know, it's not in isolation. It's not where students are don't have an opportunity to discuss their thinking or to share and learn from each other. This is what I have here is pretty much saying that project-based learning is not something just for that individual learner. So when what I described to you is more of traditional projects, meaning that there's lecture activities, quizzes, and all those things that we know that we've done in our classroom. And at the very end, you just add on this project. You know, for example, I'm thinking of a unit, you know, where one of the teachers I have worked with, they had an economics unit, and in a more traditional setting, would most likely have a textbook or some type of text for them to read, would be lecturing in the front saying, I'm the bearer of all this information. You need to take notes. And at the very end, have a test. And then by chance, if there was a piece, you know, they said, you know what, we want you to do a project, do it at home, do it at your own time, and bring it in. Okay, that's an example of more of a traditional project. Now, project-based learning, it's a little different than that. It's where the learning actually happens within the project. And so here's an example that I'm giving to you in a little journey. This is based on the project path from PBLWorks. So taking that same unit, that economics unit, this is an example of an actual upper elementary, middle school project that was happening with one of my teachers. Instead of doing the economics units where they had the actual textbook and then they did all the teaching and then did an exam and then came back with some kind of report, they created where the launch happened in the beginning. the project itself, all the learning was happening within building this project. So the way the teachers set this up was where the students learned about economics, talking about supply and demand, by actually creating a product to sell or pitch to a panel of entrepreneurs from the Small Businesses Bureau in the city or the committee. So as you can see, they had to get feedback. They had to know their product. They had to do a market analysis of whether or not that product would be marketable for the public. So, and they had to provide evidence of all their research. So as you can see from this map, they started out with the project launch. They built, they critiqued and developed because they got feedback from each other and other people and did a market analysis. And they had their public presentation, and something that you can't see in the photo here at the very end, they reflected and they celebrated their learning. So here, as you can see, I did a comparison between both a more traditional project and comparing it to the project path based on PBLWorks' project path. And so what you can see is that the project in a traditional setting is at the end. In project-based learning, the whole learning is building to create that project. Okay. A great resource for this is an article called The Main Course, Not Dessert. So what it is basically explaining a little bit more of how this is more of a dessert project because it's at the very end, and project-based learning is the main course where we are getting the full meal, the full learning within the lesson itself. So let's start talking. We talked about what project-based learning isn't. Okay, let's talk about what project-based learning is. So what I'm going to describe is based on the gold standard design elements of PBLWorks. So as you can see, there's this graphic in front of you that looks like a camera lens, and at the center of it is learning goals. So that would be the one, the plus one. Surrounding it are the 7 elements that make a project-based learning, and actually make a gold standard. So the first one, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the upcoming videos, but I wanted to share that this one is called, we start out with a challenging problem or question. And when I think about a challenging problem or question, generally I'm thinking about the heart of a project. This is what the project is geared towards for. This is what we're doing this project for. This is the why. So it actually makes learning more meaningful for students. Instead of just doing the project for the sake of just doing the project, there's a purpose. It creates a real need to know something, okay? Especially if you have a question. Your answers are actually leading into the learning that you're going to try to acquire so you can answer that driving question. And it's open-ended. It's very student-friendly, and it's aligned to standards. Remember the center of our graphic here is the learning. So the driving question or the challenge is actually aligned to that learning that we're trying to deepen and understand in this project. Sustained inquiry. Now, when we talk about sustained inquiry, it's more than just looking something up, copying it from the internet or copying it from a book and pasting it in your report. It's actually a really in-depth process of looking into, of digging into and understanding and being curious. It's actually a cycle. It's actually repeating. It's not very linear. And it's an opportunity to incorporate different information sources. So you're mixing that traditional research of looking something up, citing evidence, with more real-world resources, such as interviews or surveys or using the digital world. Things like processes that you would actually go through in a more authentic, relevant way in the real world. Speaking about real world, one of the other elements of project-based design is authenticity. How real world is the learning or the task is. Is this something I would see outside of the classroom that experts and community members would be using? One thing about authenticity, it increases student motivation. And then projects can have, when you think about authenticity, it can have authentic context, processes. We're talking about tasks and tools, quality standards, in terms of which standards are you choosing to provide an authentic experience for your students, and the impact it actually has perhaps in the community. These are things that can have that we can have within our project that are related to authenticity. The other element is student voice and choice. This is where we allow our students to have a say in a project. And by doing that, it creates some ownership for those students. It's not about the teacher. If we're trying to create a learner-centered environment, our students need to have a voice, not only in the process of the project, but also the product. So, and as we're going to talk a little bit more about this in another video, but students have input and some control over some or many aspects of the project, depending on a couple of things, such as whether it's your first project, their experience with project-based learning, and also the complexity and simplicity of the project itself. Now, this element is called reflection, and this is one that, especially for new teachers, new teachers in project-based learning, they sometimes forget to do this one piece. And I sometimes feel that this is one of the more important pieces within a project. So if you're doing project-based learning in terms of gold standard, you definitely want to make sure that you provide opportunities for your students to reflect on the content knowledge and understanding, success skills, the project design, and how it's even implemented. By doing this, you're going to solidify what students have learned and possibly how they can take that learning to apply to new experiences and new opportunities. And I like this quote, and I'm going to go back to this quote later. It's by John Dewey himself. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. So many times we have teachers who will say, if they experience it, they will learn it. But just because they experience it doesn't mean that they were actually engaged cognitively in the learning. So by allowing them to reflect on it, it solidifies it and allows them to think about what mistakes they made and how they could have learned from that. And by doing that, we create a growth mindset. And then this is another element that will help improve the quality of a product and presentation: critique and revision. During this element, if we have this within a project, you'll see students giving and receiving constructive peer feedback. Their focus is on improving project process and product. And it's not just the students that are getting peer feedback for this from their teachers. They're allowing it extends beyond teachers giving feedback. It's their peers, it's outside adults and experts. And by doing this, we're actually creating a formative evaluation for the student as well as the teacher. And last but never least, public product. And when we're talking about product. We're talking about a tangible artifact, a presentation about a solution, performance, or event, okay? When we think about public, people will say, why? Why would I want to make the product public? Well, first of all, it motivates high quality work. When the presentation or product is actually going beyond the classroom walls, beyond the teacher, it actually motivates students. It gives them that excitement, that anxiousness that you have when that nervous energy that makes students want to do better. It motivates high quality work. And then it creates that social dimension that we are a learning community. I'm going to share my learning with folks outside of my classroom, outside of my teacher, and let them learn what I learned. And last but not least, it's really an effective way to communicate about PBL. PBL, project-based learning, one thing about it is that sometimes people don't understand. They think more of projects being fluffy or fun and not the rigorous learning that you can have with project-based learning. So when you make it public, you're really communicating to the world that project-based learning is where I am learning some really relevant, authentic, and serious, deep learning for myself and my classmates and my team. So these are the 7 elements plus 1, which is the learning goals of project-based learning. So another question that comes up, and I'm going to bring this up here in our little video right now. When we think about simpler projects versus complex projects, because so many times people will see a video of a very complex project and say, I cannot do that because that's too much in terms of doing a project. It becomes overwhelming. But I want to let you think about that we can actually have a project-based learning unit that is simpler and still be considered project-based. So here's some things that I want you to think about as you start planning your project. The duration. How many hours will it actually take? Will it take a couple of hours a day? How much time? The more hours that you're going to dedicate, contact hours with your students, the more complex it will be. If you're dedicating perhaps maybe one hour or 1 hour block a day, and for 2 or 3 weeks, then that's considered more a simpler project. But if you're talking about a more complex project that will be like 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 5 weeks, that's going to be more complex, and that means you're covering probably more standards as you go through this. Breadth. How many subjects will it involve? Is it going to be one subject, or is it going to be an integrated project? If you're talking about one project, one subject, that's more at the simpler end. But as you get into more complex projects, you might be doing a multidisciplinary project that will involve maybe 2 to 4 content areas. How many people are going to be involved? Who will be involved? Is it going to be one teacher? Or are you going with one class? Or are you going to have more than one class? Are you going to extend it to include community members outside of your school? Location. Where is it going to take place? Is it going to take place within the classroom or away from the classroom? Products. How many products? How much time and skill will be needed to create them? So if you're talking about maybe one product, that 1 or 2 products, how much time and skill will the students need to learn a new skill as they develop this? Now, student autonomy. Who defines and manages the learning? Is it just the teacher? The teacher in terms of what the students are learning, when they're going to learn it. And there's nothing wrong with the teacher defining what the learning will be, or at least initially. Or is it going to be co-constructed by both teacher and students? Okay. And then the tech integration. So many times people love using the technology, but that in itself can make a project either more simple or more complex. What tech are you going to be using? Will the students be familiar with it, or will you need to introduce this new tech to them? Is it going to be another required learning within the project? Now, I only bring this up to you because we've defined what project-based learning is in terms of the elements, but I also want to let you know that within that definition, we can have simpler projects to more complex projects. Now, another thing I want you to think about as we talk about gold standard project-based learning is the project design rubric. This is available from PBLWorks. And it's a public rubric that's available. So as you can see on the right-hand column, it includes features of effective PBL. So as you can see from there, that is what we're striving for. Now, will you have all those elements on the far right-hand column of effective PBL on your very first project? Most likely not. Okay. Will you have every element being that? Most likely not. Okay. We have to give ourselves room to grow. But as you evaluate your projects, as you improve your projects, as you reflect on your projects, I really want you to use this tool to look back at it and say, where am I strong in? Where is this project? What's the strength of this project? And then when you think about it, where do I need further development? Where do I need to improve in terms of designing this project? So you will have a video called the Tiny House Project. For the rest of our videos, we're going to be using this as the anchor video in which I'm going to refer back to. So as you watch this video, I want you to use the project design rubric and ask yourself what project elements are evident, knowing that we're only seeing a glimpse of the project's entirety. So afterwards, I want you to think about a favorite lesson or unit you teach. Which elements are evident? Which elements are strong? Which elements do you think you can go back, which elements do you think you can actually, okay. So now you are going to have an opportunity to watch the Tiny House Project video. As you watch this video, I want you to have your project design rubric handy next to you. And I want you to mark what project elements are evident, keeping in mind that you may not see the project in its entirety. So you might need to infer which project elements are there based on what you're seeing. And then afterwards, I want you to think about a favorite lesson or unit you teach. Which elements are evident in that lesson? And if you had to look at this lesson again, which design elements of PBL are missing? Which element could you use to add on to your favorite lesson or unit to make it even better? So take a moment, watch the Tiny House video, and think about the things I just mentioned to you. So that was our first video, and I want to say thanks for taking the time. This is the Twitter. I'm on Twitter, so if you want to follow me, feel free to do so. And that's my Twitter handle. And this is also my website where I have lots of blog posts and other resources if you are ever curious to learn a little bit more about project-based learning.